And this is coming from someone that's very unstructured. I'm not a teleprompter guy. I'm not a script guy. I need the freedom to be able to bounce around, but I also need some kind of guidelines, boundaries, and structure, some guardrails to keep me at least somewhat focused. You know, it's kind of like this conversation. You're the guardrail. You can bring me back if I start wandering around. That's what the producer does in your ear. But more significantly than that is, what are some non-negotiables every single day that can allow me to get into a rhythm? That to me is the small ball.
Impact some men today. I think we're going to do a great job. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where we are on a mission to connect men in pursuit of their potential. I encourage you to join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sails. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I first want to encourage you to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share this podcast with someone that you know can get value from it, because it's the best compliment that you can give us and help us continue to grow. Now, to the men that are listening or watching, I encourage you to check out the Noble Knights Men's Group, where you can find the support, the accountability, and the mentorship you need to achieve your goals. Join us and become a part of a community of like-minded men on a mission to elevate their capacity for life. And I'm excited to get some wind in our sails today for my guest, who is a seasoned Emmy Award-winning sports broadcaster and keynote speaker. He's best known as the in-game reporter and pre- and post-game host for the Kansas City Royals since 2008. He's a board member of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, host of the podcast Rounding the Bases, and the author of 2 motivational leadership books, Small Ball, Big Results, and most recently, Small Ball, Big Dreams. It is my pleasure to have Joel Goldberg on the podcast today. Joel, great to have you on, brother.
Ted, so good to be with you, and I appreciate the intro and excited to have the conversation.
No, likewise. And I know the intro comes from what we could find online and what we can find on Google, right? I like to step out of the way at the beginning of the podcast and just pose the question to the guest that if you were to walk into a room, Joel, nobody knows you, knows what you do. How do you introduce yourself?
That's such a good question. It depends on where I'm at, because if I'm in town and they don't know me, I'm really happy if they don't find out what I do. You know, there's almost like something about being in the public eye and then having that anonymity. Like, I'll talk to anyone that wants to come up and talk baseball or whatever, and that might know who I am here in town or when we're traveling on the road with the team. Great. I'm very approachable. But there's still something about, so I guess I would answer this question with saying, like, I'm just a normal guy. And I know that sounds so obvious, but you know, Ted, in the television world, that it's different. It just is. I mean, it's different because there aren't a lot of people that do it. I don't think it's that difficult once you get comfortable with it, right? I mean, like with reps, like anything else, it's just another job, but it's not viewed as that. And so it's an incredible privilege to be able to do it. But sometimes it's nice just to have those reminders that, you know, I'm just the neighbor next door. I'm just that normal guy that, oh, by the way, didn't happen to be a very good athlete at all. I'm a talker. I'm a storyteller. I love people, but just an everyday guy with a really unique, unbelievable job.
Yeah, which is fantastic, because I think the story of it itself is the unique, enjoyable job that many people gravitate towards, right? Typically you meet someone in conversation and you ask what they do, and there's a high percentage that it's one of those generic prescribed jobs of, I'm a doctor, I'm in sales, I'm a teacher, and nothing wrong with any of those professions. There's a lot of credit and a lot of respect towards those professions, but for something, whereas being the voice of a team, it stands out, and it gives a hint towards a unique path. Yeah. One that many people don't walk. I'm curious, and I'm sure it's a question you get often, and you know, how did you land this job? Or just a new approach to it is, what was the path you chose to walk that would have been unorthodox that led you to get this job?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot there. I mean, first off, I always like the question, like, when they say, "What do you do?" and they're like, "Well, I'm a broadcaster, Kansas City Royals, blah blah blah," and I'll be like, "So you do radio?" And I don't like, to me, there's no, for me, radio, TV, like they're both great jobs. For whatever reason, maybe it's just, the day and age we're in, we're not in the 40s or 50s or 60s anymore. Like, to me, radio, especially in baseball, has incredible appeal. It's so old school, and it's, the description comes in the broadcaster, but we live in a TV world. And so I always thought, like, when people would say to me, "So you're on radio?" And I always make the joke, "Well, actually, I've got a face for radio, but I'm actually on TV for 30 years. And that was kind of always my joke, or however many years it had been at that point when they asked me. But I think it's not because one is better or worse. It's just because it's like, TV? Really?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's just normal, but we're seen by everyone, right? And so that's it. These are things I didn't think about when I was growing up. I just, as early as 7 or 8 years old, I do a lot of motivational speaking. And so I usually tell every audience from the beginning, and it's a segue to say, like, who in this room wanted to be where you're at today with your job? And it's, it might be a bank or an insurance company. And there's a pretty good chance that when someone was 7 or 8 years old, they didn't say, "I want to work for X, YZ bank when I'm 30 years old."
Yeah.
You dream of hitting home runs, hitting game-winning three-pointers. If you love sports, if you love weather, you dream of chasing tornadoes. I don't know what, but for me, I always dreamed of doing this. And so I'll say to an audience, who knew they were going to be here, and nobody raises their hand. And I'll say, well, I thought I was going to be here because at 7 years old, my first grade teacher outside of Philadelphia was regularly calling home to complain to my parents that I was disrupting class with updates on the previous night's baseball game. So I knew I wanted to do this. What nobody tells you when you get into this industry is how to get in and how to stay in. And that's where, and it's so much of what I speak about, that's the secret sauce. It's not, here's how to be the greatest broadcaster of all time, which I am not by any stretch. It's, how do you treat people? How do you show up being your best? I mean, there's a lot here, I know, within this podcast, about being a good man, about being a good person. You need to take advantage of doors that are open for you. I tell people all the time, don't apologize for who you know. It's a cutthroat industry. It's a cutthroat world, but it's up to you to stay. And how you stay that's based on your reputation. Does he work hard or not? Is he where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to be there or not? Is he reliable or not? And thankfully they haven't disregarded me because I'm typically 2 or 3 minutes late, but never miss a show, never miss, I got an interview today at 2:30. I will be there on time. But I'm always going to be who they expect based on what I tell them I'm going to be. But to get into the business, I always like to say it like this. 1994, I graduated from college, University of Wisconsin, and my dream is to get on TV. I had the internships. I did all that kind of stuff. I was in no way, shape, or form prepared to get in front of a television camera. Not like I am now, not like I was 2 years later. And we're talking 30 plus years ago. And we're talking internet's just starting, email's new. There's no LinkedIn or anything like that. You got to figure out how to get in. So let's just guess. I don't know, Ted, you can play along with this game. I mean, let's just guess that there are 10,000 kids coming out of school in any given year, and there are 25, 10, 15, 30 jobs open in the country. At any given point, maybe a few.
Yeah.
How do you become one of those three? Unless you're some kind of prodigy, you won't really get that good at TV and broadcasting until you do it over and over again. So how do you get in there? And I got rejected. There was, again, no email or just starting email. And so I sent in resume tapes. Nowadays, they send in YouTube links. And, I was mailing tapes of mediocre stuff, and I got rejection letters back from every single one. I called a hotline every day. It was like a 800 number that you paid $40, $50 a month for. And if there was an opening, it'd give you the contact information. You sent it off with a cover letter. And I got a rejection letter back within 2 weeks, every single time. And after the 25th I said, all right, I'm either going to get out of this profession, never going to get in, not going to realize my dream, or I got to figure something else out. And I got uncomfortable and I started cold calling television stations from my parents' landline in their house because we didn't have cell phones at that point. And I basically introduced myself. I think I had a script because I was nervous. I said, hey, I know you don't have an opening right now, but I'm passing through town next week. If I were to pop in Tuesday, Wednesday, or maybe Thursday, or would there be a time I could shake your hand and hand deliver a tape? And every one of them said yes. I was never going to any of those towns. And as soon as they said yes, I hopped in my car. I drove there. I found a cheap motel. I took a sport coat and a cheap pair of pants, go to a McDonald's, put them on, go in, meet somebody. They'd oftentimes show me around, take notes, follow up with a thank you note, follow up a month later, and suddenly they all started lining up to hire me. That was the door that I opened for myself. And then everything else has been connections and reputation the rest of the way.
My gosh. Joel, that's fantastic. And for the listeners and the viewers who are watching this, what I want them to grasp right now is the fact of the matter of not taking no for an answer and also creating your own opportunity. And you and I have a very similar experience in that regard, where I remember sending in the tapes, getting all the rejections.
It's the worst.
Oh my gosh. And I thought to differentiate myself, sending all my weather tapes in. I noticed there's a DVD. I'm sending the DVD in. It goes to the title screen. It's just silence. There's some clips of me doing the weather, and there's silence, and then the hit menu. So I thought to myself, what if I put a soundtrack onto the menu? So they'd pop in the DVD, and out of nowhere, the weather girls would start belting, "It's raining men. Hallelujah." Because I thought, at the very least, if I make a news director laugh, maybe that's enough to give me a call.
They'll remember you.
Exactly. It's being memorable.
And the other piece too, and I share this, like I always love to tell these stories because, quite frankly, the audiences I speak to are never going to be aspiring journalists or TV people. You know, if a school wants to have me come in and talk to a J school, fine, I'm happy to do that. But these are life lessons and ones that weren't really taught. They were out of desperation for me. And I didn't even learn from them as quickly as I should have, because if I'd learned from what I had done to get in, I think it would have helped me along the way with some other things that I had to learn the hard way. But what I understood was that there was no traction for me. And so I had to figure out a way. And I didn't like it at all. I always like to say to people that I'm not a cold calling type. And it's important to say that, because when people hear that story, they're like, well, I'm never going to do that. Well, if you're desperate enough, you will. And what happened was I moved to the front of the line. So this is no different than anyone that's in sales, and we're all in sales to some extent, right? You're in sales when you're in front of the television camera too. And so what I came to understand was that I had to be on their radar. It's hard to sell yourself if you don't even know if they're looking at your tape. And in my mind, I sat there because I'd seen my news director in Madison, Wisconsin, where I interned, which you could probably remember these days, paid a grand total of $0. And I got the experience, which also set me up for my second job when I went back to Madison. But I just could remember walking into the news director's office or walking by it, and his desk always had a pile of resume tapes that were stacked from, in my mind, I remember it being from his desk to the ceiling. And I thought, what if you're the one on the bottom? They may never even know you. But once I went out there and I knocked on all those doors, when they had an opening, I was already primed to be ready for it. I tell people all the time, no matter what industry you're in, if you're applying for an opening after it happens, there's a good chance you've already missed it. Yeah. And so I took the control. We hear this expression all the time, certainly in sports, and I think in life and business too, is control the controllable, control what you can control. I controlled what I could control. I did not control it the first time around, and it all worked out. And then that job came, and then suddenly a few more came after that. And it was like, man, suddenly everybody's interested in me. I already got my job. And then, like I said before, it's up to you to stay. Like, it's a miracle that I'm in this industry for 30 years, but I know how I'm in it. It's by doing the right things. And you know, it's all about reputation at that point.
If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Phaeton here, host of the Modern Man Podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind Group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals.
Check out themodernmanpodcast.com.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you've covered 2 championship teams and thousands of games through your career. What has that taught you, being a broadcaster through that? What has that taught you about just the amount of effort that goes into setting an audacious goal and coming together as a team to accomplish it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot in television that's very representative of sports, which is very representative of any business or life. I mean, unless you're in business for yourself and there's no one else in your ecosystem, it almost always is going to rely upon a team. And it's almost always going to rely on people that are, for lack of a better term, in front of the camera, right? This doesn't necessarily have to apply to a TV. Who's the front man in the organization? Is it the CEO? Is it the salesperson? Is it the meteorologist? Is it the sports guy? And no one knows about the director, the producer, the audio engineer, the technical director, the on and on and on, right? All these things that, I mean, Ted, how many friends do we have that would really even know what a producer does? They don't have to. Yeah. Right. But you know as well as I do that without those folks, none of this happens. And that's not just lip service. Like we're the finished product. But nobody sees what's going on in the editing room. Nobody sees the chaos when when there's breaking news and everything is going crazy and there's all these people on hand to pull it all together. That's true in any company. That's true in any team. So yes, the superstars that I've covered in sports, and I've covered all the sports, baseball being the primary, but I used to do all of them. Used to take some trips down to Carolina when I was covering the St. Louis Rams and a Rams-Panthers game, and I miss all those days of seeing it. But the common bond, I just see it all. I'm all baseball now, is the equipment guy, the massage therapist, the trainer, the strength coach. In baseball and all sports now, the analytics people. I mean, we're traveling with a data analyst now that's in the locker room on the road to be able to uncover little trends and things like that. None of those people show up in the box score. None of those people show up in the sales report, right? That's the common bond. That's what makes good teams, is having people that work together. I had a great piece of advice before I got into business. I was a sports anchor in Chicago who I'd been lucky enough to be connected with. And I went to high school in Chicago. I wanted to be him and everybody on TV there. And he said, along the way, get to know everybody. Get to know the head sales guy. Get to know the marketing person. Get to know the engineers. And you don't have to do their job, but understand what they do and get to know them. Because you never know when that next person is going to be your boss. And you never know when you're going to have a deeper understanding of what they do. And when you understand what they're up against, then suddenly, I said at the start of the podcast that I'm just the neighbor. I'm just the guy next door. I'd never wanted to be the quote unquote big shot on TV. And don't get me wrong, I like the spotlight. It's fun. I'm comfortable with it. But you become that guy next door, or you remain that guy next door by understanding what everybody else does, by understanding, can I help them? Am I going to make this easier on you, or am I going to make it harder on you? So nobody wants me to produce a show because I'm going to screw up the timing, I'm sure. Nobody wants, I could shoot back in the day. We all had to shoot when we broke into this business. But, you understand your lane, but also understand what the other lanes entail as well. And I think when you have a lot of people on one team that understand how each other work, that's how you get in there. And we did a show last week, Ted, that was, we do a 30-minute pregame show every day. It's not scripted, but it's formatted. It can move some moving pieces if there's breaking news. The postgame is much more fluid. But we had a big debut, one of the biggest debuts in Kansas City Royals history, with a big-time power-hitting prospect, 22 years old, straight out of Central Casting. and they made the decision to do an hour show. And there was so much sound and work going in leading up to that show that I was doing, that 3 minutes before we get on the air, my analyst, myself, and my producer basically catch our breaths, and he says, just follow me. We got so much stuff that's just being added last minute, just follow me. And we crushed it for an hour. And there was so much pride and comfort, not surprise, in trusting each other and knowing how to do it. Like, that's the sweet spot. That's the ultimate spot.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm going to go on a tangent really quick because
you go, because I can shut up for a little bit.
No, we can. The tangent is really the question, because you touched on something that you and I can both speak on, and it's I'm often in the podcast inquiring more onto the world of the guest, right? Us having this overlap and the familiarity in TV, and unpacking more of this understanding of the inner workings of the team. I could actually we could speak the same language in this world of questioning, right? And in TV, I can say for wall-to-wall coverage, there's a tornado warning. We'll have the director, the producers, even the anchors will be filtering through a lot of information in real time, deciding what is important information for the viewers at home to have, and then delivering it as clearly and concisely as possible in real time. Much like in the broadcast you just were about to jump into with your producer, he said, just follow me. There's an immense level of trust, and it's blind trust. It's almost like you're blindfolded driving a race car. When your producer says turn right, you don't ask any clarity. You just turn. I would love for you to sit in that moment again, that hour-long broadcast, the flow that you and the other team members get into. Most people enjoy the end product of what that broadcast was. That 60 minutes was an enjoyable experience for those folks at home. I would love the insights as to what goes on behind the scenes, the hours leading up to that 1 hour that makes that broadcast so spectacular, that walk-off home run that makes the end of the game electrifying, but all the work that had to be done as a team to operate in that flow at such a big level. And I'm going to shut up because I think I've said enough.
You and I could both answer these questions, which is, for me, is super cool, to be able to talk. I will tell you this, though. I won't go on this tangent too long, man. In my television news days, and I was seemed like forever in the best of ways. I was in television news for 10, and now I've been in regional for 20 plus. So it's been a long time since I've been out of it. My point is, man, I loved all of our weather people, but I hated them too, because anytime they had to go long, where did it come out of? It came out of sports, because everybody tunes in because they want to know what's going on with that tornado. They want to know what that breaking news is. There's very rarely breaking sports. And when there is breaking sports, they bring the news people in to do it. So, yeah, now I'm living in this world of no assignment desks. I get to do my thing every single day. That's just part of being in news, too. It's all my background. Everything that I learned early on came from television news. And I just remember, getting back to what you're asking, the thought of doing an hour show without a script, or even a 30-minute show without a script, those are the kind of things I lost sleep of when I was young in the business. Like, I'm never going to be able to do that. And now there's so much, there's a lot of pride, but I think more than pride, just comfort in knowing I know how to do this. And my broadcast partner, who he and I have been together, my 18 years in Kansas City, he and I have been partners for 16 years, former big league pitcher, Jeff Montgomery. My producer is with us now 5 years. He's the best we've had. There's and we're one of the smallest operations in the country. So that means that if my producer wants me to come in early to knock out an interview that can only get done if I get in early, I'll be there. And that's great. I also happen to have this role of, and I think I'm the only one in the country, just being in a smaller place, where I host every pre and post game show, but I'm also the in-game sideline reporter. And so you when you get to the ballpark to what you're talking about with the preparation, you're chasing 2 or 3 in-game reports. It might be talking to the team trainer. It might be talking to the manager, or maybe it's the hitting coach or the pitching coach. It's talking to some players. It could be, once they get there, talking to some family members. It could be talking to the other team's broadcast. Most of what we do is off camera. That's not anything that we were ever taught. I'm speaking for you. I don't mean to speak for you. That's not something I was ever taught in school. They taught you how to be on camera. They didn't teach you about all this stuff off camera, that the best stuff you learn is without a camera. It's just like life, right? I mean, you don't just jump right in and go for the big sale. You get to know someone. That's what we're doing every single day. So at home for our home times are usually 6:40. I'll get to the park around 2:30. On the road for a 6:30 or 7 o'clock game, batting practices later for the visiting team, it might be 3 or 3:30. I knew on that day last week, as you and I are recording this, it was a week ago, the debut of a top prospect by the name of Jack Caglione. And by the time this airs, in July, who knows if he'll be the hottest player in the world or the coldest, or we never know what tomorrow brings. Yeah, I just knew that this was a big day. Any debut's a big day. But I understood that this debut was coming in St. Louis, a 4 hours drive away. So all the media from Kansas City was going to drive over because, as I joked with the front office, I said, you could have made this easier on us by having him debut in Seattle, and I would have been the only one there. But now suddenly, instead of a media scrum of 2 or 3 people, there's about 30 in there. And I just knew in advance, having done enough of this is probably the biggest. The other big ones were on opening day, and it just gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. But I just knew that as much as I know how to do this, that I was going to be running behind all day chasing. So I came about an hour and a half early. And I'm not, as I said before, I'm usually a little late, not a little early. I'm going an hour and a half early, and I'm going to get all my prep work done in advance instead of the last hour before we go on the air when I'm doing all my last minute stuff. So it was all done. And then instead of chasing 1 or 2 sound bites, I was basically in the middle of scrums and one-on-ones and interviews for a good hour and a half to 2 hours. Had enough time to catch my breath, run upstairs, get my iPad, get a quick drink, quick shot of some caffeine, back down, and hey, we're going on the air in 3 minutes, just follow me. So there was no time to process anything. And it was just a matter of just trust yourself, trust your partner, trust your producer. We've been here before, capture the moment, and let's do it. And I think that's so much fun. It's like, that's when people say, how much fun was work today? Or how cool is that? Like, it's great. Like, I love what I do, but it's just another day. And I hate to say it that way because I don't mean it to be that I'm bored or that I dislike it. The normalcy to me in this crazy world is what keeps me going every single day. The ability, we hear the expression in sports a lot, don't get too high, don't get too low. 2 years ago, I covered a team that won 56 games and lost 106. And people say, how did you survive? Because I know how to do it. Here's what happened. Would I rather they win? Absolutely. But I can't control that. Again, control the controllable. I can control my energy. And so every now and then you recognize there are moments that are bigger than most other days. And that was one of them. And it was so much fun to be able to do it that I can't wait till whenever that happens. And you know what? It could happen tonight when it's a 5-2 game and there's bases loaded and it feels like I'm about ready to cover a loss and one swing of the bat, a grand slam wins it. And it's like, well, we're changing everything we just prepared. So it's just a matter of being ready all the time.
Yeah. Always being ready and having the long range perspective, expanding our time horizons and understanding, this is just a beat to a larger song. Relating to the book now, Small Ball, Big Dreams, you mentioned controlling the controllables and even being able to just get in the reps and continue to work in and day out. Touch on how small changes can have big impacts, right? One saying I say a lot is small hinges swing big doors. How can that small shift in mindset have big results?
I came up with not really the expression, but being a baseball guy for so many years now, and being in a smaller market where we don't have the Bronx Bomber, the highest dollar sluggers that a New York Yankees have. And so the Royals, they won a World Series in 2015. I started my podcast in 2017. They won it by playing small ball. So if you're a baseball fan, you know that small ball is the bunts, the sacrifices. It's all the stuff that doesn't show up in the box score. I love, one of my favorite moments in baseball is when a player comes to the plate. Let's say there's a runner on second base and there's nobody out. and he grounds out by design to the second baseman or first baseman with the only purpose of trying to get that runner from second to third so the next guy can then hit a sacrifice fly to the outfield to get him in. That's small ball. You score a run with one hit or no hits, and the guy that advanced him from second to third gets no credit. If anything, his numbers go down and they get worse. And the amount, when I look into the dugout, I'm down there reporting and I see all the high fives this guy gets for making it out. That's the definition of small ball. And so I started using it in my podcast. I would ask every guest, what is small ball to you in your business, in your life? And that's the little things that make you successful, right? For me, it's I talked about it a little bit earlier. It's always being who I say I'm going to be. It's showing up every day the same guy. And by the way, I'm not in a good mood every single day. I've got problems just like anybody else has problems. And, if they're significant or important enough that I have to take a break or share it with somebody, I will. But for the most part, people are there because they want to learn and be entertained by this baseball team, good or bad. And it's my job to keep my energy up. So to me, the little things, the small ball. So my first book was Small Ball, Big Results. It was a lot of how to get there. The second book, Small Ball, Big Dreams, was the dream stories of those getting there. And I just, and not all baseball, and same as my podcast, it's with a lot of the corporate speaking I do, it's a lot about business and life and culture. And yes, a ton of baseball stories meant for people that may or may not like baseball. But these guys all have the same story to some extent or another. They all did the little things, the discipline, the hard work, the eating right, the working out, on and on and on to get to where they're at. And like I said before, then it's a matter of, can they stay there?
Yeah. Overcoming the adversity along the way. And in the book, you allude to a number of stories, whether it's athletes, police officers that deal with ALS or even rappers, Tech-9. It's all the adversities that they overcome. What have you found the adversity provides for those who utilize it in a positive way? For anybody who's listening to this right now, perhaps they're going through their own experience of adversity and they're trying to find the fruits within the storm. What have you found adversity provides to these stories that you've been able to tell within the book?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and that, that's a little bit different for everybody. I mean, everybody handles adversity differently, and what works for me might not work for you. But I think that there's a little something about, and maybe this, maybe even going back to 1994 when I got into the business, and same for you, Ted. I mean, adversity was being told no, right? And continuing to push forward. I mean, I think the biggest key to handling adversity, first and foremost, is taking care of yourself, your family, whoever that might be, your loved ones. I mean, that comes first and foremost. But taking care of yourself and understanding that adversity is going to hit. Nobody's skating through life without adversity, and you hope it's not too serious, but you're going to get it. I mean, we all do. And so how do you handle it? Do you have the right people around you? And then pushing forward, like life doesn't stop, and you might need to slow down. But for me, it's constantly saying, and for me, at least, like the baseball calendar and the baseball schedule and the baseball grind, I'm going to do every televised game we have, which will lose some to national TV, but it's somewhere around 155 games in 6 months. That's 2 shows a day, pre and post. It's not stopping. It is not stopping. So, you have to figure out how you move forward with it, and then make adjustments. Like for me, it's understanding that you can't be 100 miles an hour all the time. And, that's going to sound like somebody that's now older, and that's true. With age comes some wisdom. It also comes with the fact that you can't do what you once did. But I wish I knew when I was younger. I can't tell you how many players, like towards the end of their career, that I'll say, what would the current version of you, I never say the older version because we never call guys old in baseball. We say veterans. But what would the current version of you or the veteran version of you tell the younger version? I remember having this conversation with CC Sabathia with the New York Yankees at the time towards the end. And he said, I would have told myself just to slow down and enjoy it more. We're all moving so fast. And I think that when you slow things down, not only do you enjoy it more, but I think you have a little bit of a better ability to handle that adversity and not speed things up. And in some ways, that's what I did last week with that show that I was telling you about. That, okay, here's what it's going to take, and then let's just trust it and roll with it. But the only guarantee is adversity's coming. I mean, everybody. And I'll give you this real quick story too. Last year, we're in Texas. I think I wrote about this in the book. It's amazing how you suddenly forget. But I think I added this on towards the end because I've been working on it for a couple of years. But Salvador Perez, who's the captain of the Royals, been their catcher since 2011, probably, we believe, in the Hall of Fame one day. Legendary Royal now. I've covered him longer than any athlete in my career. And we're in Texas. It was their first bad weekend of the year, this June. And they lose. They lost every game that series. It's, I think, a Saturday night. And he had gone 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. So I get on the bus. There's 3 team buses afterwards. And you kind of know where to sit and where not to sit. Well, I sit in the second row because the front row is going to be players are in the back. But the front row is going to be the manager, or Salvador Perez likes that front row. Somebody of importance. So I sat in row 2. I'm talking to my kid back at home, or who's in school, college. And he understands how this works. And we're chatting, and Salvador Perez gets on the bus after his 0 for 4 strikeout night. And I say, hey, let me call you when I get to the hotel. I want to be respectful. Sure, I understand. I put my AirPods in, or maybe they're already in from talking. And the bus pulls out, and Salvador Perez turns around to me. And I feel him tapping me. I have my head down and tapping me in the chest. It's a big dude, too. He says, Joel. Pull out my AirPods. What's up? With a big smile on his face, he says, when's the last time I struck out 4 times in a game? He's laughing, like not laughing, but a big smile.
Yeah.
And I'm like trying to think of the quickest, wittiest thing I could say. And I don't know the answer to that question. And I said, I don't know. I was trying to avoid that discussion. And with a big smile, he says, why? It's just a baseball game. I get to go back and do it again tomorrow. And I thought, man, in that moment, that dude right now knows how to handle adversity because he's already turned the page. And I didn't know there was a young player across the aisle with his wife and little infant son. And I didn't know if that was for me. I know this much. They weren't playing good baseball. And the next day I went on the pregame show and I said, Royals are really struggling right now. Welcome in Texas. This is their worst stretch of the year, but I can tell you this much. Led by Salvador Perez, the captain, they are upbeat and confident heading into today, and they've already flushed yesterday. So, okay, maybe he was showing a little bit of confidence, and we're okay.
Yeah.
But then I said to that young player a couple weeks later, hey, did you hear what he said to me that night? He says, oh, yeah, I heard every bit of it. I said, I mean, you're a young guy breaking into this league. You think that message was for you or for me? And he goes, I don't know. Maybe it was for both of us. So there was leadership there and this ability to handle adversity in the moment and turn the page. And no, not every bit of adversity in life is the equivalent of 4 strikeouts. But think about the way that guy said, okay, time for me to do my job tomorrow. And time for me to do my... And I love that story for the obvious reasons. But 2 days ago, as you and I are recording this, we're in Chicago, and he goes 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. First time since last year. And the next day he hit a home run. So there you go.
There you go. Always bouncing back. That's fantastic. And speaking of adversity, it does build growth and it does expand us as human beings.
Yeah.
A 2020 American Psychological Association study actually suggests that facing obstacles enhances grit and resilience, which are core themes within the book that you highlight through the stories that you share in Small Ball, Big Dreams. You also alluded to the importance of small ball and how that can continue to help someone show up every day, even in the thick of their adversity, continuing to, as you mentioned, your small ball showing up as you are, as you say, you're going to show up each and every single day. What does small ball look like to you? For anyone that's watching this, wanting to play small ball in their lives, what would that look like for them in their personal lives and their business as they're trying to build that consistency, that resiliency, and that grit through their adversity?
You know what? I think it's different for every person. And so I'll say it this way, that what works for me may not work for the next person, but I think being open to what others do and just paying attention to it all, whether that be listening to a podcast, reading somebody's newsletter. I love, one of the people I follow is James Clear with Atomic Habits, and he's got a great app, and I've started using that recently. And it's triggering me to form better habits. that work for me, they may not work for the next person. Right? Like, I'm not a great morning person. I work nights. I'm not capable of sleeping late anymore, but I'm never going to be the guy that gets up at 5 a.m. to get the workout in. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to enjoy it. So, okay, that doesn't work for me. But I tried it at a certain point because I saw that it worked for others. For me, I want to be able to start the day off with even if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes of some type of a meditation. From home, I get up, feed the dogs, get back in bed. Actually hope that I could sleep a little bit longer. And then if my wife wakes up before me, she feeds the dogs. But whatever it is, whenever I get up, there's such a temptation to start to scroll social media and to look at what's going on in the world and look at emails and all those things. And that's coming. But if I could start that day with a meditation and just slow things down, get a little bit of gratitude or perspective. I'm not a woo-woo kind of guy, but what I find is that if I start the day with that I'm going to be better. If I can get a workout or some kind of movement in every day, unless there's a day game, so at least 5 days a week, I want movement. I want to be able to eat a little bit better. And these are all things that I'm focusing on right now. And then it's amazing how that sets my day. But I'll again get back to, Ted, what I said. Like, it's going to be different for everybody. And so I think if you sit there and say, what's the key to doing this and looking for that secret, we're all wired differently. So being open-minded and listening and reading what other people do and pulling and trying things. I think the most important piece to small ball is routine. And this is coming from someone that's very unstructured. I'm not a teleprompter guy. I'm not a script guy. I need the freedom to be able to bounce around, but I also need some kind of guidelines, boundaries, and structure, some guardrails to keep me at least somewhat focused. You know, it's kind of like this conversation. You're the guardrail. You can bring me back if I start wandering around. That's what the producer does in your ear. But more significantly than that is, what are some non-negotiables every single day that can allow me to get into a rhythm? That to me is the small ball.
Absolutely. I love that. And we are big fans of routine and structure here on the podcast. And I call it the daily discipline that we commit to each and every single day to consistently, continuously push us moving forward towards that goal, towards that dream, towards the outcome that we have agreed upon with ourselves, the commitment that we made with ourselves along the way. And being a storyteller of yourself, Joel, and sharing these stories in your book, Small Ball, Big Dreams, whether it is the athlete, officers with ELS or Tech 9, what is it you hope people gain from these stories? What is it you hope that they learn from experiencing and going through these stories?
You know, the hope is, first off, those stories are all relatable. So can you relate to the police officer? Maybe not, but there's a good chance you know someone that has ALS or some kind of horrible disease. Can you relate to being, you know, a meteorologist or a sports broadcaster? Maybe not, but can you relate to the grit and resilience? Can you relate to being a rap star like Tech 9? Most of us probably cannot, but how has he been able to stay in the business for so long and being open-minded? So I think my hope is that there's so many how-to books out there, and I'm not anti how-to book, but the stories I have are my stories, you know, or at least from my perspective. And so wanting to share, you know, I mean, the beauty of this job is that I get to ride shotgun and see so much and see so many high-level performers. And then when I started my speaking business around beginning of 2017 and started the podcast, which led to books, is then saying, I want to meet the Tech 9s of the world and some billionaire businessmen or some unheard of startup entrepreneur that had the guts to do this and found something. And then you hope that everyone within there has there's some aha moment or something in there. The Tech 9, the beauty of the Tech 9 story, and I had him on my podcast, and he's a Kansas City legend, but I think anybody that likes rap music is certainly familiar with Tech's work, and he's a high energy dude, you know, getting closer now to mid-50s and still cranking it out. So I said to him, this is a few years before the book came out when I did the interview, but I knew I was working on this book. I said, what did you dream of growing up? I started asking everybody that question. And he said, I wanted to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist growing up, but they didn't teach those classes in my school. So I stole the books from the library and I read up on it and I learned about it. But he said, and I run this clip now all the time from the podcast in speeches hoping that people can find purpose in their work. And he says, but then I got into dance, and from dance comes rhythm, and from rhythm comes rhyme. And suddenly, and he starts rapping, freestyling in the moment there. I mean, it was actually a couple of his lyrics. And I don't get a lot of people that suddenly break out rap right in the middle of a podcast answer. And he says, but something really amazing happened along the way. He said, I started showing up for meet and greets and hearing from people on social media, and fans of mine would say, your lyrics from this song saved my life, or your lyrics from this time really helped me during a challenging moment in my life with bullying or mental health. And he said, in the end, my work and my desire to be a psychiatrist, I became my fans' psychiatrist. And so I try to tell people all the time that you may be doing some work right now. You don't have to be a rap star. You don't have to be a meteorologist. You don't have to be a baseball broadcaster. You may be doing some work right now. You almost certainly are, that can actually help people's lives and give you some more purpose if you dig deep enough for it.
I love that. Man, Joel, that's absolutely fantastic. And I want folks to be able not only to learn more of these stories, but to extrapolate the value from them and continue to learn from the work that you do as well. So what are some of the best resources, links for folks to reach out, connect with you, get the book themselves, and experience these stories firsthand?
I'm all over social media. So I think the one-stop shop is my website, which is joelgoldbergmedia.com. And within there are the books, the podcast. So we've got it's close to 1,000 episodes or something like that with podcasts. That's been going strong for a long time. And I'm on all the social media channels, whether you want to reach out on LinkedIn. I try to say yes to anyone until they start cold selling me right on the fly without knowing me. But we're all there. Instagram's Joel Goldberg KC. X is Goldberg KC. I'm on all of them. It's easy to find, and I always love to hear from people.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll have those links in the show notes below for folks to reach out and contact you. Last question, usually is the heaviest one, which is why I save it for last. And if it's something we covered already, feel free to revisit that. But what is something you've seen or something that's happened to you that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
I think I am the parent, the father of two amazing children. And, I watch both of those kids. They're both in college right now. I watch both of those kids going through high school during a pandemic, and their generation, like it's a harder generation. And so I sit there and I think that being a parent, like being a kid in this day and age, is harder than anything we ever had growing up. And I think being a parent is harder than anything that our parents ever had growing up. Now, our parents might disagree with that. I don't really know, but it's just, we're living in a different world right now. And so I just think for me, it's like that being the number one priority. And I give my wife a ton of the credit on it, but that's the grounding piece. That's where it all starts. I don't even remember if I'm answering this or not, but it's like, no matter what you're doing, hopefully we're all driven and we want to do great things. Of course, everybody wants to do great things. But why are you doing them? What's the purpose? And for me, it's to provide for the family, and the bonus is that I happen to love what I do. But in the end, when you're facing that adversity, when you're having that bad day, and again, you're going to have them, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And I tell people all the time, even if you don't love your job, why did you take that job? Well, I've got to pay the bills. Okay, then that's what you're doing. Like at minimum, there's a reason for it. If it's for yourself or for your family, that's it. So I hope I'm answering that, but in the end, amazing that I'm living my dream. And, to steal from the book, yes, I did play small ball and the dream came true. But nobody teaches you about the adversity and the resilience and the grit and the why. And the why for me is my family.
Fantastic. I love that. Seasoned Emmy award-winning sports broadcaster and keynote speaker, best known as the in-game reporter and pre- and post-game host for the Kansas City Royals since 2008. Joel Goldberg, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Ted, thanks so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I'm going to recap some of the gems you left along the way really quick, because a lot of our listeners are either driving, working out, or cleaning while listening. We appreciate you listening. You missed a spot on the kitchen table, though. Just might want to give that one more once over. But just a normal guy How many of us might get the attention for a certain title? This is perhaps the CEO that is listening, the C-suite executive, the high performer, the professional athlete, which, thanks for listening, bro. Reach out. I'd love to have you on. But whatever that title might be, is that eclipsing your identity? And are people seeing you as that title and not as who you really are? And it's easy to get the title because with reps, it's just another job. The thing you do over and over again. How many times has that professional baseball player swung that bat? How many times has that professional football player thrown that ball? It's all about the reps that make the job easier. How to get in and how to stay in. We're not taught on how to get past the gatekeepers, and it's the creativity and the resilience through adversity that gets through the filter that takes most people out. Open the door with creativity. If there's not a door there for you, you might have to build your own. Make a hole in the wall and craft your own door. Meet others where they're at. Perhaps you're trying to white knuckle things your way, but you're not being adaptable to the environment around you. And the adversity is going to hit. We say it over and over again. You're either coming out of a storm, heading into a storm, or in the thick of one. Either way, adversity is a guarantee. How you meet that adversity is by playing small ball. Playing small ball, slowing down to enjoy more, embracing the suck and embracing the beautiful things in life. Playing the small ball, having that routine, having your base habits so you can show up as yourself on your good days and your bad days. So the days all lead to that end game that you've been looking for. Lean into that routine, lean into that structure. Be sure to pick up the amazing stories and learn more with Joel Goldberg's book that is now available. Small Ball, Big Dreams. And of course, be sure to reach out for Joel to learn more. We appreciate you guys making it to the end. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can get a new episode each and every single week. Leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing. It's the best compliment that you can give us, and share this with someone else you know can benefit from these episodes. Like we always say at the end, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.